everybody for coming. I'm really excited to give this talk. I'm really happy that you're here. This talk really emerged after Steve Cuppy in one of his Monday newsletters said that they would love it if people would, do talks about trips that they go on. And so far, to the extent that I know, I think Warren and Mary Ellen were the only ones who've done this so far. They talked about their travels to Ukraine at a particularly important time in Ukrainian history, a very sad time in Ukrainian history. And so now this is going to be the second talk, I think, like this. And I want to tell you that we went to Oxford knowing that I was going to come back and give this talk. And the fact that I knew I was going to give this talk actually made the trip to the UK more fun. Because you're always trying to get good photographs when you're on a trip for yourself. But this was the added dimension of, well, what things would other people be interested in me? And also, of course, as I started putting this together, I found myself looking up information about things that I've seen for years over there, but just never bothered to really look up what they were. So, an example would be today. I'm going to talk about the Radcliffe campus, and I said, why is it called that? Do you know? And Paul goes, no. Well, it means room. Okay, that kind of thing. So anyway, it made it more fun, and so this picture is of a pub that we love, an open-air pub, right on the river path on the Thames River, which we, every day that it's not raining, when we're in Oxford, we walk that path to get into the center of town, which is a medieval town, basically. So we stay always at something called Hockwell House, and I think one of the reasons it feels more like home is it's got the word hawk in it, right? I mean, it really does, and it's a small boutique hotel with reasonable prices, very nice staff, and equally important, it is situated with one of our sons being a half-mile away from it in this direction, and our other son being a half-mile away from it in the other direction. So it's dead center between our loved ones. It's also less than a half-mile down to this Thames River path that we try to take every day when it's not raining. This is our family in Oxford. In the first picture, you see Ben and Bryony with George when he was a baby. Ben is Paul's son and my stepson, and he was raised in London and now lives in Oxford. In the third picture, you see George now, who's now age 6, and Arlo, who's age 2, their second son. In the middle picture is our son Daniel, who's 33, who was born in Iowa City. No, he was born in Ithaca, but has lived in Iowa City since 1990 and went to West High here. So, forgot where he was born. Well, so the first weekend that we were there, we ended up going to trail races. This was a race that's sponsored every year to support one of the local schools. And in the first photo, you see Bryony with George. He's about to run his first mile race. In the middle, you see George and Ben after they've run their races. This is the first 10K that Ben has run since George was born. But before George was born, Ben was a great ultra-marathoner for many years. Ran lots of 100-mile races in the UK. And actually got into running UTMB, if any of you have Mont Blanc, I don't know, the most exciting trail race probably in the world. But George was on the way, and he kind of decided to not run it. Daniel's goal is to get into that race. He's trying really hard. He ran a race a couple of months ago where he came in fourth. Had he come in third, he would have qualified. So we're all waiting for him. And then after the race, that's the family. They're getting together. Our hiking trip in the South Downs, day one, So this hiking trip was supposed to be a trip of 6 walks in 3 different hotels. The tour group is in travel. That's where we got it from. And Mary Jo and John have done these kinds of in walks before as well. And the way it works is they take your luggage, your big luggage, from hotel to hotel when you move hotels. But so that every day all you have to wear is a backpack with your lunch and your water and maybe a rain jacket. So we started our first day at the northernmost part of this 3-hotel and 6-walk trip. And these were some of the photos from that trip. It was supposed to be a 9-mile walk, and it was well over 10 miles because we got lost so often. Okay. Then this was the second hike in the South Downs, and the pictures on the 2 ends are of the yew trees that we encountered on this walk. The first one is just a picture of one of the big yew trees. These yew trees in this area are anywhere between 500 and 2,000 years old. And the third picture shows us walking under this forest of yew tree, and it's kind of spooky. You can see that, but in a good way. The way the light dapples through the trees is just amazing. And then in the middle is the Devil's Humps, or burial grounds. They have bodies from 2500 BC in there, but they also added more in 849 AD when the town of Chichester was attacked by Danish Vikings. The Vikings lost, but people from that war were put into this mound and died in that war. South Downs Day 3. You see that it no longer talks about our hikes. After the second day, Paul developed a very sore hip, and it became clear we weren't going to be able to walk 9 or 10 miles a day, and so we rode in the taxi with our luggage to our second hotel, the Royal Oak, and we just chilled out there to recover from the first 2 walks and sort of plan what we were going to do from then on, because we were going to have to find other ways to spend those days. And so on the 4th day, we went to something called the Weald and Downwind Living Museum. It's an older, more elaborate version of Living History Farms and more. It's that kind of place. So it's open air. It has more than 50 buildings that were built between 950 and the 1800s. They were taken apart in other parts of England and then brought to this museum. They have people in this museum who know how to put the buildings back together when they get here. And just like with Living History Farms, it's not just a bunch of buildings that you walk past. It has woodsmen who show you how they used to split rails. It has candle makers. It has brick makers. It has blacksmiths. It has farm animals running all around. And I chased this, Paul can tell you, I chased this particular rooster all over the place. Well, I finally got the shot that I wanted, and I just was so pleased with that one. And it has vegetable gardens and flower gardens, so just all kinds of people around there to tell you anything you want to know, and you can walk in it sort of all day. It's very hot the day that we were there. We were there in the last 2 hours of the day, but it was just boiling. Then days 5 and 6, In Travel had said in its brochures that if there was any way you could stay extra days, you should stay an extra couple of days in this hotel because they considered it to be so special. And it really was special. It had amazing gardens. So here's some other pictures of the gardens. They're just spectacular. And then one of the extra days we spent sent there, we went to Chichester, which was, oops, no, how do I get rid of that? Oh, you're not seeing it. Never mind. Chichester. And the first picture of the cathedral there, you can see it's just a splendid cathedral. I was not able to get a picture like that, so I had to download that from the web. But the other picture is of a window that I took from inside. Daniel's girlfriend and I went in for the tour of the cathedral, and it was a 2-hour tour. And it was given by a man who lived next to the cathedral all his life, and he just loved that cathedral. I mean, it was really, I don't know, just so much fun to have somebody who just glowed with love for this place. But he's also funny, and he's very attentive to questions, and so it was a great tour. And then after that, she and I went into the wonderful little cobblestone streets in Chichester. Lots of unique little shops, so we went in one and each bought an item of vintage clothing. We went to one of her favorite, it's a small chain in England called Velvet Mint, I believe, and we each bought something there, mint velvet. And then we bought a small oil painting for our daughter-in-law, Bryony, for her birthday. So just, 3 lovely little things that we purchased in these tiny stores, so we love Chichester. Okay, let's see what that is. Okay, hang on, I've got to do something.
This is a Roman center. Move there, Roman.
There. Okay, now it's back. There was something on the screen that's hard. So, in another one of those extra days from the Mill Stream Hotel, we went, Daniel drove us over to see our niece Hannah and her new 33-acre farm. Hannah had lived in Brighton all her life, and as she and her husband approached 50, they said they thought they had one more adventure left in them. And believe me, these were adventurous people. So Hannah never went to college because she wanted to be a professional dancer. She danced on cruise ships all over the world. She taught choreography so other groups could dance on cruise ships. These people, when they had their first son, Max, when he was a month old, was this little red-haired baby. She was red-haired at the time still. And they had this red-haired baby on their backpacks going through South America, and everybody stopped them. Of course, they could speak the language, and they're just adventurous people. Where did they go skiing once? In a Middle Eastern country that most people don't. Iran. They went skiing in Iran once. This couple, they're very adventurous, and. So they decided they had this one last adventure in them. They sold their house in Brighton to buy this 33-acre farm right next to the South Downs National Park. It's a 100-mile path for runners, mountain bikers, and people on horseback. And both of our sons had run the 100-mile ultra-marathon on that path. But anyway, there's a lot of strict specifications for buying this land. So other people had tried to buy it, but the way they wanted to use the land didn't meet with approval from the South Downs Park. And so their plan for the land is to rewild most of it. That's a word we even now use in Iowa now. It just means putting it back to its original state. So most of it will be put back into its original state. This view of hills in the third picture is what they look at every morning from their window. Right now they're living in a house trailer because they can't build a house on the property. And so in a few years from now, they will get somebody in to renovate the dairy barn to be their home. Right now they're living in a trailer. This is Max and Bella. They're 2 kids. They're both carrot top red. Their ages 9 and 6. And they also have, though, a small area for a vegetable garden and a flower garden, and then they sell their their flowers once a week right on their property. They also have plans to put in a small yoga studio there. Hannah, having been a dancer, is also an excellent yoga instructor, and about 6 years ago, she got very interested in giving free yoga lessons to traumatized people. So it's called trauma-informed yoga, and it's mostly, in her case, it's mostly women who've been abused, but anybody who has any kind of PTSD from anything, yoga teachers can be trained, and some of the yoga teachers we've had in town have been trained for trauma-infused yoga. Things like informed yoga, things like they know that people who've had trauma don't ever want to feel like they can't get out the back door, for example. Things like that, so they're alert to that. So they're going to put that little yoga studio there. And then 2 more pictures from there. Here's some of their produce, and I love this picture here. They're allowed to have up to 10 campgrounds on the rewilded land, and there are no facilities there, so they get people who are used to very rustic camping, and she said that they've just been wonderful people who come through. Okay, so now we're going back to Oxford, okay? We're at Oxford now, and here's the Thames footpath, and you'll notice what some of these names like Thames, if I'd never gone to England, I could still be calling it the Thames, right? And there are a lot of words that you would not know how to pronounce. That when we were in the middle stream, it looks like Bosham, but that's pronounced Bosom. It's all over the place. You just never know how to pronounce anything in England, in my opinion. But anyway, you can see here that lots of people live in, not lots, but some people live in riverboats along this path. We take this path every day that it's not raining to get into the center of town. Oxford, the name itself comes from a place where ox can ford the river. That's where it comes from. Oxford was settled in the Saxon period between the 5th and 11th centuries. It was a strategic location because the northern part of the Thames intersected with the River Cherwell, and that made it a strategic location. But when it really took off in terms of growth was when the first university college came along in the 1100s, and that's when it really started to grow in population. So it now has a population of 162,000. Anything else I want to say about that? After the university started, it was granted a royal charter in 1248 by King Henry III. It has 38 colleges now, and it is sometimes known as the City of Dreaming Spires, because almost every one of these colleges has either a tower or a cathedral or both. And of course, everybody has aspirations to be educated there. Okay, so the footpath is just wonderful, and that pub that I showed you on the first slide is right on the side of this footpath. This is beautiful environment. Okay, here, the Oxford Botanic Gardens. This is almost the first place that Paul and I go to every time we go there because it's ever-changing throughout the summer. You can see maybe in the middle picture that there's a bit of a wall above it. Sometimes of the year, what's along that wall is just spectacular, and I've taken panorama views of it and then used it as cover photos on Facebook. This year when we went, it wasn't as spectacular as sometimes it has been, but here are 3 shots, different times and places in the Botanic Gardens. It's really just a spectacular place. Okay, this is also, whoops, interesting, the Landmark Trust Old Parsonage in Iffley. Now, Iffley, this place is 2 blocks down from Daniel's house. And it's a place that we stayed in 2016 with the family because it sleeps 6. And Max and George had been, George and Max had just been born. And so the whole family is there. It sleeps 6. And it has 3 stories, and from that top story there, you get amazing sunsets that's in the back of it is a big back garden that goes right down to the Thames. So it's a spectacular place, and I want to talk a little bit about the Landmark Trust because you might want to stay in the Landmark Trust. It's not the National Trust, it's the Landmark Trust. And they were founded in 1965, and they're one of the major conservators of buildings that are perhaps going to be lost forever. This one, being in the city, was never in terrible shape, and most of the buildings they have restored from the Landmark Trust were just ruins, and they have a staff of incredibly skilled craftspeople of all different types to put a place back together the way it would have been when the rich people lived in them. So you can rent these out either for the weekend for 3 days or Monday through Thursday. If you want it for a week and you're lucky enough, you can get the whole week. Of course, when you're trying to... Now, Paul and I did a lot of these, stayed in these places almost every time we went to England for a long time, but we no longer feel like we can drive in England, so we'll be restricted to anything that's in cities for the Landmark Trust. So this one is there, you could get it for 6 people, and there's also another one in Oxford in the middle of town that sleeps too. So we stayed in both of them, they're very nice. The Sheldonian. This is another one where all of a sudden I'm starting to ask questions I've never asked before. Like this morning I said to Paul, you may be able to see them, there are 17 big bearded men outside the Sheldonian on those columns there, and they're all the same, and they're called the Emperor Heads. Nobody knows in particular what I guess they represent kings, so emperors, right? And they're a ton each. Okay. Yeah, and the Sheldonian was designed by Christopher Wren. It was named for Gilbert Sheldon, who was Oxford's chancellor at the time. And it's used for concerts, lectures, plays, and university ceremonies, and that's relevant to Paul because when he graduated in 1968 from Oxford, that's where his graduation ceremony was. Up here, here's the Radcliffe Camera. I hope I said the right thing. Camera in the beginning of the spot. Anyhow, camera just means room, and Radcliffe Square, the square in front of the cathedral, is the most beautiful one in Oxford. Tourists love it, and they also film period movies there. But the camera, Radcliffe was an Oxford student who went on to become the physician to the King of England. And he became very wealthy, and so in his will, he specified that his £40,000 should be spent building this Radcliffe Camera. It is now a library. And then there's the Radcliffe Square. And the Radcliffe Square is in front of the University Church of St. Mary, which is the official church of Oxford. A few years ago, the New York Times did a list of the 10 top places to eat in Oxford, and it put the cafeteria in there #1. And of course it didn't do it because it's a beautiful place. It's not got the ambiance of the Webster. It's because people of all types go in there. It has very good food, very nice staff. So you'll find parents taking their kids in there. You'll find students in there. You'll find tourists in there, and they're all rubbing elbows on kind of benches that are right next to each other. So it's a very quaint and Oxfordian kind of place. And then this. This is sort of a really, really splendid version of Prairie Lights, I guess. And it was begun in 1879, so 143 years ago, by Benjamin Blackwell. He was the son of the city's first librarian. One of the things I love about it, at any time you're walking in central Oxford, you will see about Blackstone bays on their shoulders. Blackwell bays. Thank you. So I love this. And Paul and I probably go there every other or every third day because in addition to great books, when it's about 5 stories of books, they have a great coffee shop up there. So you can buy a book and go read. So I love Blackwell's. And in the 1990s, the Blackwell family decided that they had a strategic plan to expand. So they put up 18 different Blackwells throughout England. You know, there's one in London, one in Bath, and they had 1,000 staff in those 18 Blackwells. And unfortunately, they decided last year that they still needed more monetary infusion, and so they were acquired by Waterstones in February of this year. So one of those really sad stories of a family business for 143 years going under. Magdalen College, that's another one. Would you say Magdalen? No. It's named after St. Mary Magdalene, right? But it's Magdalen College. It's the 4th wealthiest college in Oxford. It's also got just about the highest academic standards in the university. And it's also known for that tower up there. On May Day, or May 1st of each year, the choir goes up there and sings. This is Christ Church College. This was founded in 1546 by King Henry VIII. What you're looking at here now is Tom Tower, and it was designed by Christopher Wren. It, too, is one of the wealthiest colleges. Its alums include 13 British prime ministers. It, too, is featured in period films. It's filming for Harry Potter was there, Brideshead Revisited, and The Golden Compass, among others. This is Trinity College. Now, when we went there in June, the first picture shows that you couldn't really get into it, and this signage up there was keeping you out of it, and we were really sad because they have a beautiful garden at Trinity, and as you can see, they have a beautiful dining hall. It's a small college and a beautiful cathedral, and it's especially special to Paul because that's the college that Paul went to. Okay, and these are the last 2 slides. So, Oxford Hidden Walks. Paul had his 75th birthday while he was over there, and so his kids gave him this Oxford Book of Hidden Walks, which allowed us while we were there to take some of these hidden walks. And you notice on here that they also have hidden walks guides for London, Edinburgh, etc., etc. And England in particular has done a great job of preserving natural spaces inside its towns, cities, villages. And so these last 2 slides show you some pictures that we took from some of our hidden walks in Oxford. So here in the middle you have punting. Both Paul and Ben are excellent punters. This is a field of barley on the right. This is another animal I had to really chase down with my camera to get that beautiful shot. There's a large meadow attached to it's Christ Church College's meadow. You can walk a long ways around the meadow, and they have longhorn cattle in the field. And the last 2 pictures were taken from places very close to our Hawkwell House Hotel. So that's my prepared remarks, and I'll open it now to questions or observations you have from times that you've gone to Oxford or other places in England that this reminds you of, or anything. Yes?
I've been punting on the Cam, but I haven't been punting on the Thames. The boats look remarkably, or the punts look remarkably similar. Have you done both?
I believe you would history with rowing in Cambridge and
I was Cox for my college team, Trinity College, Cambridge. Trinity College, Cambridge is the companion college to Christ Church here in Oxford. At any rate, getting back to Trinity, when I arrived there, it was suggested that perhaps I could be a Cox for the Trinity Fellows boat. Now, the races that are held on the River Cam are races between undergraduate colleges, but there are also races among graduates. So for a couple of years, I was Cox. And I'll tell you, when you start off and know absolutely nothing, and you're in charge of a boat, it's a quite surprising experience.
So did you just yell at the rowers? Was that your function?
Remember, the Cox can see the front of the shell. All the rowers are facing backwards, so they don't know where they're going. Okay? So the purpose of the Cox is to direct the boat in the appropriate location, and this is quite important during a race.
So how did you do it? What would you say?
Well, I issue commands to the rowers. So I'm in the back, they're facing me, and I issue various commands to keep the boat steering in the appropriate direction.
But you had to yell.
But what?
You
Oh
had-
yes, you have to speak loud. I think by now they may have a loudspeaker set up for the Cox, but that was not the case when I was a Cox. And partly what happened is I would issue the command, and of course the rowers right in front of me would get it, and they could pass it to the back.
so even now when we go down the Thames path, you always have the cops yelling and also people from the path now yelling instructions about the form. It's a bossy kind of place. Oh, I also forgot to mention there are some museums in Oxford. I should have had them here, but the Ashmolean is a fabulous museum, and art museum, and there's a natural history museum. Others, Paul? No? I try to get him to speak up, but sometimes it's okay when you can't hear your husband, right? Anybody else? Yes?
Well, I'm just curious, and how did you do meet?
Oh. Well, yeah. Okay, yeah, that's sort of an interesting story. I almost forgot, but we met in the States. I was teaching at Cornell University, and he was a visiting professor. And he stayed, he was there for a year, and then he asked to stay on, and we were already dated. And then after those 18 months, we went down on a trip to Mexico, and he went back to England, and I sobbed. And we dated across the Atlantic for 7 years. And then got married in '89 and had our son, and they helped us, they let him stay at Cornell for a year while we were looking for jobs, and we got 2 offers, and one was from Illinois and one was from here. So, and we're really, we hadn't heard. In Wisconsin, people kind of laugh at Iowa, and I'm from Wisconsin. And you can tell I'm from Wisconsin because of the way I say it, right? But we have been so fallen in love with this city. And reading mine to him, but he gave me an ultimatum, and I said I wasn't moving. And I said I wasn't moving because I had a daughter. And I would, lose custody of her and only see her on summers. And also, I was teaching industrial relations, which is heavily legislatively and regulation bound. So for me to teach in England would be much more difficult than for him, who was a general economist, or to come over and teach here. And so he gave me an ultimatum to come over, and I said no. And so then he spent a year rethinking that. And here we are. Okay, well,
Did somebody else?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. You said there are 38 colleges at Oxford now. How many of them are women's colleges? Do you know? All?
I don't think any of them would know single sex. I mean, there's
Oh, okay. Some of them are co-ed.
right.
Okay, how many are co-ed?
there aren't any all-male colleges there anymore, are there?
So that's what I was saying.
Yeah, my assumption is they're all co-ed.
Oh,
They're mostly co-ed, but they're not all co-ed.
okay. Good.
No, I was just curious about specific, that they each specialize in something specific, or are they just general colleges, each one?
Each tend to have their specialties. It's not like this is the College of Law or this is the, but yours was good in psychology and philosophy, right? Some of them are good in music. So people do choose the colleges based partially on what they think they're most interested in.
So how many students does all of that? It sounds like a lot of students.
Oh, I did a lot of background research, but I don't know how many students.
Curious. Are we talking thousands, 30,000?
No, again, I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but I would say maybe 15,000.
Yes.
This may be a question for Paul, because in order to be in University of Cambridge, you have to be in one of the colleges. In Oxford, in Oxford, yeah.
In order to
In the University of Oxford, you have to be a member or student at one of the colleges.
yes.
Okay, you couldn't just be matriculating at the University of Oxford.
Yes.
You couldn't, she said. You couldn't without joining one of the colleges.
Oh, without joining one of the colleges? No, you could not without being a member of one of the colleges.
What about graduate degrees?
Graduate degrees, same thing.
You're admitted to the college, not to the university. Okay, well, I think that's about it.